Starting with a disclaimer.
Oh, yeah. So remember how last time we did a disclaimer? Same thing.
Today's episode again deals with sensitive topics relating to genitals.
I would hope it's sensitive.
Particularly female genitals. Also be prepared for two mostly straight white cis men to mansplain vulvas to you.
My art has been commended as being strongly vaginal, which bothers some men. The word itself makes some men uncomfortable. Vagina.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, they don't like hearing it and find it difficult to say, whereas without batting an eye, a man will refer to his dick, or his rod, or his Johnson.
Johnson?
Hello, dig for bone.
I don't think anyone knows that I'm the one cut off your toes and put them in the drawer with the sock.
Hello, and welcome to the Least Haunted Podcast. I need my glasses. That's the problem.
All right, well, while Cody gets his glasses, I'll introduce the show. Welcome to the Least Haunted Podcast, a place where science, skepticism, humor, and anthropology meet to discuss all things spooky, haunting, spectral, and sometimes just the plain ridiculous. He is your host, Cody Franks, and joining him, as almost always, is...
Wait, what? Hold on. Hold on.
That was so smooth.
Also, Jared's here. He's gonna be listening in, everybody.
Then joining...
You could just do the alliteration. I did it perfectly.
Okay. Gathering a glut of gynecological genitalia
Oh, God.
precipitate a palatable partnership of particular paraphernalia of the phallic persuasion, a veritable volcano of vulvas and vaginas volleying off of penises and gonads.
A glut of genitalia? Garth. Jesus.
I know this
That was
dare I say, an orgy created.
Yeah,
that.
oh my God.
Collaboration.
Holy shit, that was the best moniker ever.
That was once again, that was Ken.
Thank you, Ken. Wow, I was not prepared
But
for
that was a fun little alliterative ride. It started with G.
Yeah,
G,
it went into phallic at some point.
G, P, and V.
Wow, we're really getting colorful now.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to join in the fun and submit a moniker for Garth, you can do so by joining our Discord. Hang out on the Discord with us.
Come. Hang out on the Discord.
Wait, did you say how come?
No, I said come.
Oh.
I said come.
And then I started to say hang out. It's okay. All right, we got to stay on track here. So we're going to do an episode about vaginas and also some penises still, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, hang out on the Discord.
And also, we usually shout out Patreon.
Also join the Patreon, patreon.com/leasthaunted. There are tiers. Not the bad kind of tears, the good kind of tears. We're not crying about it. It's like tears of money that you can give us for
Enjoy
things.
because this content is so delightful.
It is, yeah. You can enjoy Polterbites, which we just recorded 45 minutes of all kinds of great stuff.
That got real deep.
Yeah, we got real deep. We penetrated deep into.
Okay, so
all right, go ahead, Cody.
Today's topic is genital magic continued. So last time we talked about Richard Payne Knight and how his phallic fascination accidentally led to the modern world. Real fun fact that I forgot to mention last time: the word "fascinated" comes from penises.
Whoa, how is this?
It's Latin. It's to be the fast. So like the word like fascist comes from the root fascia, which is a bundle of sticks. Well, what's one stick of out of a bundle?
Breakable.
A dick.
Oh, so fascists are a bunch of dicks.
Yes, a bunch of dicks.
But to be fascinated is to. How does this work?
Because it's a Latin. Hold on. God damn it.
Well, you brought it up. I don't know. I don't understand.
There are a lot of big feelings, I'm sure, surrounding that whole experience.
Yeah. Have you ever sat in on a normal episode that we've recorded? This is normal. There's always dead air. We cut it out. Yeah.
I figured you guys had a lot of editing.
Yeah.
Stuff that I never know about.
Yep. There's always the me throwing a weird curveball at Cody.
Yeah.
Dead air.
Oh, shit.
Okay, so the answer is that it is to fascinate actually comes from like the Latin word to to be bewitched or, by something. So you're fascinated, like it has entranced you, but then tied through that, it goes through witchcraft and sorcery, and you move through different cognates, and it ends up with all the way back in Proto-Indo-European Bashko, which means a band or a bundle, but then also was used for an amulet in the form of the phallus called a fascinum, which was to ward off evil spirits.
But fascinate in modern times means like something is really interesting.
You're interested in the thing.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
something to do with the magic of it or
Yeah.
fantastic fashion. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, okay.
You pull a deck out, everybody's gonna stop what they're doing and be pretty enthralled, I'm sure.
I mean, it depends on the situation.
I don't know. It's across the board, buddy.
Well, I'll get into that.
Okay.
Okay, so real quick, so I kind of took a sidestep away from Richard Payne Knight. His fascination, his literal like dicks about dicks, led to the modern world. Specifically, his theories how in the ancient past in the northern hemisphere there was an ancient religion that revolved around the phallus.
Okay.
So we're gonna dive back into this topic and their association with magic and religion, focusing more though on the Middle Ages. Also, we're gonna talk more about the female genitals than the male this time.
Okay.
So I read another book this time.
Oh my gosh, Cody.
Junker.
Where did it go?
Right.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
There it is. So you read the whole book?
So remember I said that the last book
You read a whole book last time.
Well, yeah. Well, the last time I read the first volume in a 2-volume book
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
by 2 different authors.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
2 parts. And so this time I read the second one. So last time.
Oh, I see.
So last time it was the one written by Richard Payne Knight, and that was written in 1786. This time I read The Worship of the Generative Powers During the Middle Ages of Western Europe by Thomas Wright, and it was written in 1866.
Cool.
So whereas the last time it was like reading the Founding Fathers talk about dicks, this time it's reading Abraham Lincoln talking about vulvas, a topic, legend has it, that he wasn't as well versed in as you might think.
I know.
So Thomas Wright, he's a British antiquarian and a founding member of the British Archaeological Association. He's primarily known as a translator and editor of medieval texts. And it's while he's translating a whole bunch of medieval texts and editing them together, he starts noticing certain themes, and that leads him to write this book. Also, just about the time that he wrote this, they finally reissued Richard Payne Knight's book about the worship of Priapus. Because remember I said it was like underground and like people had to obtain like secret illicit copies of it.
Oh, right,
yeah.
right,
So
right.
finally they re-released it in like the 1860s. So almost 100 years after it was written. And
was it more available to
it was
everybody
more
at that
available. And
point?
so
Okay.
when this book first showed up, it actually showed up in a 2-volume set.
Oh, and that's what you're holding in your hands there.
What I'm holding in my hands is the 1970s reprint of that 2-volume set from 1866.
Okay, that's why it's Founding Fathers and Lincoln. So the second half of the book was written 100 years later.
Yeah, about the time of Abraham
407 years later came the vaginas.
So his work is a continuation of sorts of Knight's book, but the scope is a lot spread wider. They spread wider the scope of this subject. For one thing, he focuses almost equally on the female generative organs as he does the male, and he lays out a very convincing case for the symbolism of both penises and vaginas being used in the Christian faith during the later Roman Empire and into the Middle Ages.
Okay, got it.
There's a bunch of things we have to address. First, is Middle Ages and medieval, what's the difference? I'm going to be using the term interchangeably.
You're not going to use the term Dark Ages, though.
No, that is verboten.
I just said that because I knew you'd be.
Yeah, so the names medieval and Middle Ages are interchangeable. And and they refer to the period of European history that lasted about 1,000 years, from the end of the power of the Western Roman emperors, circa 476 AD, all the way through to what we call the modern era, starting in 1400.
So we're going from Charlemagne to Gutenberg?
Pretty much, yeah.
Or Charlemagne was 700, so we're going from...
And Gutenberg is like the 1500s.
Gutenberg would be getting toward the end of the Dark Ages.
You said it!
Damn it!
Put a quarter in the jar.
Oh, God damn it.
So as it turns out, the practice of incorporating depictions of genitals into art and architecture didn't just abruptly stop with the advent of Christianity during the Roman Empire. In fact, once Rome Christianized, as we have already explored in other episodes, pagan traditions that were so fun to celebrate were given makeovers and folded into the new tradition in a number of ways, some more veiled than others. We'll start with a magic spell
Okay.
that almost every adult in the Western world is very familiar with and has actually performed probably many times without ever knowing the ancient origins of it, or that indeed they are casting a magic spell at all.
I almost don't. Do I want to know this?
Care to take a guess?
It's so vague, but it has to do with genitals. Is it when you shake when you're done? I don't know.
No. I speak, of course,
Oh.
of the digitus impidicus.
Oh.
The digitus infamus.
The finger.
The middle finger.
I remember when I was a little kid. I remember listening to They Might Be Giants, and there was a lyric that went like, "Mainstream USA, flip that guy the bird."
Mainstream USA, I flipped that guy the bird.
I remember asking my dad, "What does that mean?" He's like, "Well," and he explained to me what the middle finger was. I never.
Magic real?
Yeah, I never known it until
Okay.
then. But I mean, I don't actually do that much magic.
So-
I think.
The middle finger goes all the way back to ancient Greece, and it's always been a
Are we gonna just hold our fingers up this whole time?
Because
Okay.
it's going to illustrate something.
Cody and I are
and
now
I hope the
flipping each
and
other
the
off.
listeners are hopefully are doing this as well.
Yeah, everybody listening right now, raise your middle finger up. I don't care where you are. You can be on a bus. You can be in
and
the,
look at it.
You can
Just
be in the
look
middle of
at
work
it.
with earbuds in. Hold up your middle finger and just sort of wave it around.
Okay.
All right.
So it's always been a gesture that indicates scorn, but more so, it's a gesture of protection.
Oh, like a shield. I'm
So
holding this up
remember
in
we were
front of me.
talking about. I think long ago we've talked about the evil eye and
Yes.
poke him in the eye with the dick.
Yeah.
Right, I remember that.
So when you do the middle finger, you are making a gestural representation of an erect penis and the testicles on either side.
Now, are the testicles?
Your curved fingers.
Yeah, but I've got 4 testicles here.
Well, no, think of it as these two fingers make one ball, the thumb and the index finger make the other ball.
Okay, so my pinky and ring finger are one ball.
Yes.
All right.
Right?
It's a shadow puppet with dubious contours.
So, man, my hand's getting cramped.
All right, no more finger.
Okay, so
Shake it out with
Yeah.
with devil horns. It's the
so
other way.
the idea of using a penis to ward off the evil eye.
Yeah.
So the evil eye is, we're going to do a whole episode just on the evil eye at some point, because
Okay.
that is like one of the most widespread cultural ideas of witchcraft across culturally. Like it is
Oh,
an archetypical idea that you can cause harm to somebody by looking at them alone and based on your intentions.
Interesting.
So the way to ward this off is to poke him in the eye with the dick.
Right.
So
Poke that evil eye.
there
Yeah.
were little talismans that you could get that were an erect penis.
Ah.
And this was carried, Roman soldiers carried them for protection,
Whoa.
and various people did. The idea is that you had to have it somewhere on your person to protect you. What happens if you do not have it on you? Well, that's okay. You can make the gesture with your hand,
Ah.
and by doing so, create a magical protective barrier. Fuck off.
I was just imagining, like, practically having a talisman hanging around your neck of an erect penis would mean that it would have to hang from the head of the penis, like a.
No, not necessarily.
Well, because if it's hanging from the balls and the penis is pointing down, it's not erect.
It doesn't
So
have
it's
to hang
gotta
from the
be
head.
upright.
It can hang from the shaft, Garth.
Yeah, but then
nobody ever considers the shaft.
But then it might
Garth.
wobble around unless the balls have a lot of weight to it.
Oh
It's
yeah, they're
gonna wobble.
counterbalanced. It's
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
it's balanced.
okay, fair enough.
I can show you
I would
engravings.
please. I need illustration here. I'm a visual learner.
I mean, it's a pretty virile statement to be raiding your way across the countryside with a big ol' erect dick around your neck.
Yeah. I think I mean, I can see this working for the Romans.
Yeah, it's,
Well,
it's on brand.
It's on
This
brand for the Roman Empire, exactly.
This one's a little different, but you know where they've attached. That's a beast.
Oh, this is amazing. All right, I'm going to take a picture so we can put it on the Tumblr.
What you were looking at there is actually another Roman thing that is called a tenabula, and essentially it is a wind chime that is in the shape of like a dick beast,
That is beautiful.
Sometimes it's a beast that has a head made out of a penis and a tail that's made out of a penis, and then it has like a dog's legs and wings.
I saw some of those in the illuminated manuscripts that I'm going to be doing for Garth's
And then
Corner.
from various points of it, they would hang bells, and basically they were wind chimes to also ward off evil spirits as a symbol of protection.
They're very whimsical.
Yes. Oh, by the way, we have Jared, Muleman Jared joining us. The ambient laughter and comments you might hear, that's Jared over there.
Now there's another gesture that is means the same thing that has been kind of lost to history, and that is the fig, or the making of the fig. And to do that, what you do is you make a fist.
Oh, I think I've seen this.
And then you place your thumb between your index finger and your second finger. In a way that if you were punch someone like that, you're definitely breaking your hand. But
yeah.
And that is also supposed to symbolically represent a tiny little penis.
That's pretty abstract.
It is abstract.
So yeah, my thumb is just poking out from between the knuckles of my middle and index finger.
But it's called making the fig.
Why would you want a little penis?
Because it's insulting to the person.
Oh, this is you. Is what I'm saying. You know what I think? You're that big.
Yeah. Because
got it.
And there are talismans and amulets that are found that are shaped like two arms that are crossed around each other.
Yeah.
One is giving the middle finger, the other is making the fig.
So
those are very common.
This is me. This middle finger's me. This is you over here.
And it actually it moved through all the Latin-speaking countries, and then eventually it made it to England, where they then used it as an expression, and it shows up in Shakespeare. So to read from the book here, it moves through a few different languages, and by the time it comes to England, they refer to it as the fig of Spain, because it's like a Latin. I mean, it carried on in Latin-speaking countries because it's a Roman gesture. So anywhere where they're speaking a Latin-based language, it survives. So England doesn't really have it, but then they get it. It comes in via it's what the Spaniards do, so they call it the fig of Spain.
Okay,
but it also it has the same meaning of to say fuck you.
Yeah.
And so in Shakespeare, he says, "A figo for thy friendship, the fig of Spain." Henry V, Act 3.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it survived into the 1800s in English as an expression meaning to give a fig. For anybody, or a fig for anything.
I don't give a fig?
Here's the book. Not meaning that we estimate them at no more than the value of a fig, but that we throw at them the contempt which was intimated by showing them the phallic hand, in which the Greeks, as stated above, called... And then he has it written in Greek, because here's the thing. At the time this was written, it was expected that you could read Greek and you still knew Latin.
Back in the 70s, everybody could read Greek and Latin, Cody.
Anyway,
but that's really interesting. So you throw the fig in this case, and it was. Is he saying that was an insult to you?
Yeah,
it's still saying you got a little dick.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
And also that it's a sign of contempt. So it's like I wouldn't even. It's like to say you wouldn't give a fig for something. It's like I couldn't give a fuck.
That's what I'm wondering.
Don't give a fuck.
That's what I'm wondering about the phrase.
I wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire.
If the phrase "I don't give a fuck," I wonder, because fuck's been around forever.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that dovetailed from "I don't give a fig."
Well, also, if you are showing the sign of an erect penis, what do you do with that? Well, you fuck things. So fuck off. Fuck you.
That's why people
sit on it and spin.
Yeah.
Now there's the apocryphal story that the two fingers that the British use is fuck you. That's their version.
Yeah.
That is supposedly is a story about archers when they were fighting against France in the French-English wars. The French would cut off the bow fingers of the British archers, so they could never, as they said, pluck you. And then there's this idea that it was like a pun that pluck you sounds like fuck you.
That's not real.
Not real.
Okay. Interesting. I'd never heard any of that.
It might be though that seen as England was never fully Latinized. Yes, Rome was there for a while, and it was a Roman colony, but then they left this much more influence from Northern Europe. That the use of the digitus infamis kind of fell out of favor, and then it came back in at a later point, and they adapted it and added the second finger. I don't know. But yeah, that's one that is Anyway, what does all this have to do with vulvas,
Well,
right?
before we leave the finger, I want to take a poll of everyone here. That's you two. When you flip somebody off, would you want to have all of your fingers clenched except for the index finger? Because the other version I've seen is this one, where you have the pinky and the thumb also somewhat extended. So really, the only two pulled down are the ring finger and the index
Why
finger.
would you do that?
Because it looks like a bird. See, I'm flapping my thumb and my pinky. That's why
so
it's
like
called the bird.
Oh.
I don't know.
Well,
No.
that kind of makes it cute. Like,
Yeah.
if you're really flipping somebody off, you're not going to be like, little birdie.
Well, that's how I did it ever since I heard that They May Be Giants song. I'm like, hey. So anyway.
What does it have to do with vulvas? I'm glad you asked, Garth.
Hey, Cody. What does this all have to do with vulvas?
Okay.
You're talking about the other part.
Yeah. Okay, so to get into that, some terminology I want to get out of the way.
Okay.
Word origins.
Okay.
So vulva, late Latin, it means womb. It's related to vulvo, the Latin vulvo, which
Vroom,
means,
vroom.
which means to twist, to roll, or to turn, or to revolve. Cognates exist in Sanskrit and other Indo-European language families, so it actually is a really fucking old term. Now, why does it mean? Why would they be using that for womb?
Yeah.
You know, to mean like to roll.
Yeah, wombs don't rotate.
There is an old belief that they do wander.
I've heard of wandering wombs.
To be hysterical
Is
is because, her lady bits have migrated around inside her body and made her go crazy.
That's really
So there were a lot of
ridiculous.
ideas of how to lure it back into place by maybe putting good smelling food down
That
there
is one
to
of
like
the more
draw it down. No,
that is one
it's
of the more
crazy.
medieval theories I've ever heard. My wife is hysterical. Well, her womb has wandered up into another part of her abdomen. Yeah. Wow.
However, the use of vulva to refer to female organs of generation is actually a relatively late development.
Okay.
The Greeks used euphemisms to describe it, with Hippocrates.
Hippocrates?
Yeah, well, here's the thing about ancient Greek. You can pronounce it any way you fucking want. Like,
Clitoris, clitoris.
It's not Hercules, it's Heracles.
What?
It's
Oh,
not
that's the same person?
It's not Theseus, it's Theseus. Yeah.
My mind is blowing. It's
So it's probably
All right.
like it's Socrates. Actually, Socrates is a much more accurate pronunciation than Socrates.
All right, I'm going to withdraw my correction
So
of your
actually,
pronunciation
it'd probably be
right now.
Hippocrates.
All right, so what did Hippocrates say?
Referring to that part of the female anatomy, he called it the shame parts.
Oh, God. Dude.
And it seems for
dude.
much of male history, it was taboo to even talk about it. In 1545, French anatomist Andreas Vesalius referred to the clitoris as membre honteux, which translates to English as shameful member.
Fuck you, dude.
Even to this day in medical texts, the term pedundum is used,
Pedundum.
which is the Latin verb form that means to be ashamed.
That's awful, but I guess not surprising.
Yeah. Either way, the term vulva wasn't commonly used to describe the lady parts regularly until about the 1500s.
Oh, okay.
Now, vagina is based on the Latin word for sheath, as in for a sword. It wasn't used until the 17th century. And it
Oh.
reflects an even older Greek association, and that was until relatively recently, in this scheme of things. So-called medical professionals and philosophers regarded that the female is an incomplete male, and that the vulva was nothing more than the inverted penis. Arguably, though, the Y chromosome is just an incomplete X, so actually men are the incomplete female.
Yeah, we needed a little leg on that Y. Oh, now it's an X. Now it's complete.
And that's the problem with men, Patty. The Y gene is just an incomplete X chromosome, dig? A man is an incomplete female.
So we're overly complete because our genitals stick out. Yeah, that's really interesting.
So I'm actually going to try to, from here on out, avoid using the term vagina generally, if I can help it, for two reasons. One, the term...
Because you find it hard to say?
No.
Without batting an eye, you'll refer to your... No, sorry.
The term, in a modern medical sense, only refers to the opening in the first part of the internal structure of the reproductive organs. If I were going to use it, it'd be like I'm referring to an anatomical feature of the whole.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But also, since the term originates to denote the anatomy in relation of or contextual purpose of the male member,
I see.
I feel it's a bit disrespectful and dismissive to use it in a general sense, because it means to sheath a sword.
Yeah, it has no other purpose than that. It's
Right.
like, well, that's a little reductive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I feel like there needs to be a better
Not
term.
all sheaths even want a sword.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's patriarchal. Thank you, Jared. I will use vulva to refer to the whole of the external assemblage, so to speak, because it is much more encompassing, even if the origin of that word just meant the womb.
It's a nicer sounding word, too.
And so it might be kind of like misguided to use it because it used to mean womb, but I feel that it gives more credence or an impression of the actual like biological female experience of like you have a womb, right?
Sounds good to me.
But also,
Yeah.
let's take a moment to address that gender and sex are two separate things.
Yes, and please forgive me if I mix those up in the conversation. I'll do my best.
Sex is biological and gender is a social construct, but also within sex, that's not binary either. There's a bunch of different combinations.
There are
you can
times
have
where
of
you even
chromosomes.
have, yeah.
So I made that joke earlier about the Y chromosome, but there are a whole bunch of different combinations that outwardly express in different ways, and so it's a lot more complex.
This is a very complicated case, Maud. You know, a lot of ins, a lot of outs, a lot of what have yous, and a lot of strands to keep in my head, man.
When I start talking about female, I'm talking about like biology.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, good thing to point out.
I guess I should mean, actually, when I say female, I mean,
You mean
having
biological female?
yeah,
Is that
having a vagina, being a person
a
with
vagina person?
Oh, I almost said vagina again. A person
vulva,
with a vulva.
vulvad.
Yeah, vulva
A
individual.
vulvad human. A vulvad individual. Oh boy, we got through the
Yeah,
minefield.
We're
All right.
really putting our foot in it. Our mouths. Not,
Our mouths!
Not,
I'm not putting my
Okay.
foot in a vulva, Cody.
okay. But what was it called in the Middle Ages? What did they call this thing?
What did they call
Believe
that
it or
thing?
not, that for a period of a few hundred years, at least in Old and then Middle English, the term used for the vulva is what today, at least in American English, is considered the most vulgar swear word we have. Cunt.
Oh,
Or in
yeah, it's up
Chaucer's
there.
Canterbury Tales, quaint. When
Quaint.
something is quaint, it is
I'm gonna call it that from now on.
also porcelain. The term porcelain
Yeah.
comes from a pig vagina.
Porcelain.
Yes, porcine.
Are pig vaginas porcelain in color
No, it has to do
and
with
shiny?
it's. Look,
Sorry,
it's
all right, we'll
it's
move
a much
on.
more. I know.
We'll move
I know.
on.
I'm the one that brought it up, but I just want to point out that there are words that we use every day
That are actually
related to
Yeah,
vulvas.
actually. Okay, got it.
Uh,
So cunt then.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so we'll talk a little bit real quick on the origin of that. Again, another very old word going all the way back to Indo-European. We get it through Old Norse, kunta or kunta, which also it means the vulva, basically.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, though, it actually was referring to the butt.
Oh, that's confusing. You
Yeah.
don't want to mix those up. That's not very well defined. If
But
you're
it
gonna
keeps
mix
going
those
back.
up.
You can follow the word back through all of its iterations and how it evolved and get back to, there's the Latin word cunnis, which means a wedge, which is where we get the term cuneiform,
Oh wow,
the oldest writing
Whoa.
system. And so, yeah, we actually,
Okay.
it seems that the ancient Proto-Indo-European root is actually to create or to become. And actually is also where we get the term, like, it actually had a G sound instead of a K. It was a G instead of a K. And that's a sound shift that happens.
Oh, okay.
And so it actually is where we also get, like, gonads, genital, gamete, genetics, gene.
Wow.
Also, even in the Indo-European, it might mean wedge, too. So it's, like, referring to the shape.
The shape, yeah.
But also some might... There's be people who've said it also kind of might relate to that sheathing thing too, of to wedge, to put something inside.
Wedge could have multiple meanings in that way. That's really fascinating.
But that's where the word originates. It's a very old word, and for a few hundred years, that was the official term.
So back then, cunt wasn't offensive at all. That was actually just the
Yeah.
word.
And
Interesting.
but then let's address that strange occurrence that over time it went from the term that everybody used.
That's what's fascinating to me.
And then it becomes the most vulgar and offensive
Yeah,
word.
there's so many words for vulva. And yeah, that's probably the most like shocking one
Right.
in American English, as you pointed out, because in Australia or You lived in Australia for a while,
Oh,
Jared.
it's a culture down there.
And it's very much not offensive down there.
No, it's
like a term of endearment.
Yeah, it's a catch-all. It's
Yeah.
like the word fuck. Like it can be used
like
in
you're
a
going
million
out with your
ways.
Yeah.
buddies, you
Yeah,
know?
it's the noun version of the word fuck. But that's in Australia, and I guess maybe in England as well.
Well, so how did this happen? Well, I mean, everybody already knows the answer. Patriarchy, duh, right? That's
Let's get into it a little further though.
so the word actually takes on a vulgar connotation during the 17th century.
Okay.
It's when it starts to shift, kind of around puritanical times as well.
But it seems to have only shifted in America. Is that? Do you think?
It's our puritanical thing.
That's
We're Puritans
because
in
yeah,
America.
it seems of all the English-speaking parts of the world, it's just in America that it's become
Well, because
such a
sex
slur
and
or
also
a bad
just
word.
anything referring to sex, the act, becomes so taboo to talk about in our mindset anyway.
Yeah. Okay, that's sort of natural
Right.
that would happen.
In fact, from the mid 1800s until the year 1960, no dictionary of the English language had an entry on cunt.
Merriam-Webster would never stoop.
But even Oxford didn't touch it.
Oxford would never touch.
Yeah.
Cunt.
It's a man's place.
Yeah, exactly. We don't accept cunts in
Okay,
Oxford.
but here I hear everybody yelling, "You promised us magic. Why are you like just
Yeah.
explaining
What
what
kind of
a
a least?
vulva
What
is?"
kind of a least haunted episode is this?
Okay, well, enough beating around the bush, so to speak. What
Did you write that?
Yes. What did Wright have to say about magical genitals in the Middle Ages? So we're going to go to the book for some examples,
Okay.
and then do some explorations.
Sounds great.
The first thing we are going to discuss is Sheila Nagee, or Sheila Nagig. And Sheila Nagig is it's an Irish name given to a little figure that is an exaggerated little imp-like person who is spreading open their vulva very wide.
Oh boy! Oh, I'm so excited. The 13-year-old me is so excited to see Cody's handing a book to me. Oh, that's great! Wow, there's 4 different examples of this, and boy,
Just on that cut,
they
there's
all
more.
hit. They all hit very differently.
So, yeah, the name Sheila Nagee.
you know the progress of these 4 pictures. We'll put it on the Tumblr. Is reminiscent of in The Shining when the lady comes out of the bathtub
Yeah.
and you're like, ooh la la. And then by the time you get to the end, check this out, Jared.
So the name Sheila Nagee is actually Irish. There's some debate on actually what it means. Sheila seems to be a name, which also might suggest that the individual is part of the she, which is the Fae folk.
Okay.
Right? And then na means of, and then gi or gig can either mean bosom, but also can mean vulva. Because even in modern Irish, they use the term gi to mean the vulva.
Okay.
And so
Got
it's
it.
Sheila of the vulva. And it's pretty obvious that's what's going on. Like, that has to be the origin.
It's very clear. I mean,
Yeah.
in these pictures, they're all like very different styles, but they're all a lady using at least one hand to open her.
She's
herself
a little,
up.
sometimes called a hunky punk. It's like a little leprechaun or a little
But
horror.
the last one is terrifying. She's like half skeletal, like a little gremlin, and her vaginal opening is way larger than her actual crotch, so it just like sticks out. Yeah, that's
and so,
scary.
Where you find these, are in lots of places, but also in Ireland, they are over church entrances,
Wow.
like the doorway to the church, or inside the church somewhere.
See, I find this so fascinating because I think of like Christianity and like Catholicism and the church as being so uptight about sexual anything and sexual repression, and yet they're carving these and putting them up as little talismans in the church.
Yeah, and so the
Wow.
idea is that they might, like, it's debated about the actual purpose because nobody wrote about them at the time. We do know that they are not originally Irish. They actually only
Okay.
came to Ireland in like the 12th
That
century.
was my guess. Is that was some kind of a tradition
They find them more. Yeah,
pre-Christian-
you find them more
Christianity.
in France, in the area where the Normans came from.
Oh, okay.
And the Normans actually located to that area, and they were originally a group of Vikings who kept attacking France, basically, or what was like Paris at the time, the Kingdom of the Franks. They were attacking it, and finally the king was just like, "Look, dudes, if I just give you a bunch of land that you can settle, will you fucking stop?" Just stop.
Did it work? Did it work?
And they stopped attacking France. But what they then did was they went across the English Channel and invaded England, and that's the Norman conquest of England.
Got it.
they had influence,
that's
and so once
fascinating.
that Norman conquest happens, they start also having interactions more with Ireland, and so it seems that they brought the Sheila Nagi with them, and it ended up in Ireland that way. Ireland also has a longer contact with Vikings. The city of Dublin was a Viking trading post. So like there's already like a Norse influence going on there. So like you get
There'd be a lot of opportunities for Sheila to immigrate.
Yeah, I've also noticed that there is
emigrate.
a lot of artistic similarities between Norse like knotwork carvings and Celtic knotwork carvings. There's just a lot of overlap in those styles in this because they were dealing with each other. Anyway, I digress. So Sheila Nagi, she isn't always a she. I mean, I have to explain. They do not always look the same. The only thing that is a constant is the spread vulva. Sometimes they have breasts, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they have hair, sometimes they're bald. Sometimes they have beards and other masculine features.
That's super fascinating.
But it's still the wide open vulva.
Well, and I noticed that just in those 3 pictures, some of them were more clearly feminine, but like the last one, other than the vulva itself, doesn't necessarily didn't have any other features that were clearly male or female. Yeah.
The purpose is debated, but the 2 kind of main theories are that it is a sign of protection to ward off evil eye influences, much like the dick.
Yeah, so you can protect from the evil eye with either.
And there are examples from antiquity of stories where the flashing of a woman's genitals warded something off. Also used for comedy too.
Yeah,
because it's funny.
Yeah, mooning is which is more your butt, but like that's universally.
There was
funny.
a time when the term that was used for that, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was in this book, was interchangeable. When they would say that, it could mean, depending on context, either that they flashed the butt or they flashed the front.
Well, I mean, if you bend over far enough in a mooning, you could do both.
A whole
at once.
fruit basket.
Yeah, you just spread your legs a little bit as you stand, and you can get both at once.
So the other idea is that
a whole what basket?
A fruit basket. The other idea is that it's a fertility. It's like to help with fertility, in a kind of like a holdover of like a pagan thing, where it's like, well, what are you going to the church to pray for? And one of it might be like, and so that's where you get some more magic. Some of these Sheila Nagi have been rubbed bare in the. So it
which
seems
part? Like the whole thing, or the pubis? See, I keep wanting
to
not say
like
vagina.
The vulva has been rubbed to like where it is worn smooth, and so it seems that there is also some kind of performative magic ritual as well of like, well, if I rub it for luck, and that was also reflected with the worship of Priapus, where there were and into the Middle Ages too. There are not just that festival that happened in Naples with all the wax voti, but there are other examples of them having a wooden phallus that was paraded around and said to belong to a saint. And then you would scrape off wood from it to get shavings, and that would be ground up and mixed into potions or drinks to try to ensure fertility.
Wow.
And this was like known by the church. They were like, yeah, this is just the thing that's going on.
As long as it's a saint's dick and not some kind of heathen's dick, then.
Yeah. And so you get, so yeah, you're getting Sheila Nagi in the church. And it occurred to me also, this is another like thought that I had today about, so in certain places, the way you ward off the evil eye isn't with the dick, but actually with a representation of a counteractive eye. It's another eye. And the idea is that it, it challenges it, or it's the eye of protection. Examples are the Eye of Ra. Is an amulet that's used for that same protection. Greek ships would paint eyes on the prows of their ship to ward off the evil eye against the ship and keep them safe. They're kind of cartoony depictions of the eye where it's almost almond shaped in the circle. What happens if you take that shape and you just rotate it 90 degrees?
And maybe the eye looks in one direction and the circle
you
rolls
end up
up
with a vulva.
Yeah.
An open vulva. So that might also be another reason why that representation was associated with warding off the evil eye.
That's really interesting.
Also, it's the location of generation. It's where life comes from.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, there still is this connection to the divine, and that implies protection as well.
Wow.
Third eye, in a way.
So we're going to move on from Sheila Nagee to pilgrimage medals.
Okay.
So in the Middle Ages, pilgrimages were all the rage. It's not just a thing that Muslims do to Mecca. Christians also, I mean, that's why we have the Crusades, or pilgrimages to the Holy Land. And so a lot of pilgrimages weren't as long as going to the Holy Land. They were shorter distances, going to various churches to see relics of saints.
You could if you had months to take off, you could go on a whole crusade.
Now-
But
yeah,
maybe
right.
you just go a weekend and you go on a little pilgrimage.
Now, have you ever seen like a camper van or a motorhome, and there are stickers on the back in the shape of states that they have been to?
Oh, I've certainly seen this. Yes.
When I was a kid, we did road trips. We had a dashboard cover, a fabric dashboard cover, and my mom would buy at every state we went to a little medal in the shape of the state, and you could build the
Oh,
the
that's
country
cool. So
on
they're
the
all
thing.
they're all sized to each other.
And so it would make the map.
Neat.
Well, these pilgrims had the same thing. Is when you would go to these different sites and you did your sacrament or whatever you did there, you paid your homage, you would then get a little mass-produced pewter medal that you would then put in your hat.
That's so back then they had like gift shops
Yes.
and trinkets,
You would make a donation and you would get them.
merch.
Yeah, merch.
Merch
Wow.
for the rage.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And then by having also these saints' medals around you, they
That's
also
more
had
of a
protection that you had,
protection, yeah.
right? Now, some of them were genitals,
Yeah.
both dicks and vulvas.
Yeah.
And then other representations of vulvas. So things that were evocative of it. Like one was they would use a scallop shell. But that goes all the way back to the depiction. Oh, I mean, move forward. Venus emerging from the shell
Oh yeah.
is another. It's another.
Okay.
A way to make you think of like, there's a vulva.
You could pick.
I mean, come on. You've heard the vulgar description of a clam, the bearded clam.
I was just
and
thinking
stuff like-
there's
yeah.
so many different
Yeah.
animals of the sea that
Mostly
are
mollusks and
reminiscent.
bivalves.
Yeah, a lot of mollusks.
Bring forth the mollusk cast unto me. Let's be forever, let forever be free.
Look,
You know, the idea
it really
that,
is.
the idea
yeah.
of when you eat oysters, it gives you virility because you're eating something that from a certain angle looks like a vulva.
Oh, easy,
And therefore
yeah.
there's transitive properties.
There you go.
That's magic.
Yeah.
Sexy magic.
Sexy magic.
And food magic.
Food magic.
You guys like oysters?
I do.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a
Conditions.
I'm a fan. I like oysters in a can. I didn't mean to rhyme that. I just
Oysters
I-
come
I
from
really-
a can.
I am what I am,
They
and
were
I like
eaten by a
oysters.
man.
I do really like oysters. Yeah.
So you get these pilgrimage medals, and they look like genitals. They find a lot of them. They were finding a lot of them. They're pulling them out of like rivers, out of like the Seine. They were pulling them out. Where there were some that were medallions that were on one side was the image of a saint or the cross, and on the other was either a dick or a vulva. And there's no way you could look at it and say that's a toe, and that's I don't know. Well, actually, there is something else you could probably argue what it was, but
It's
I'm
not
saving
really
that.
a vagina. Oh my gosh, yeah, there's a winged dick pointing down.
But then look at the vulva.
Oh, there's a sideways. Yeah, I mean that one
Turn the
even
book
has
the other
that one
way.
even has hair.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, ooh, that flying dick has bird talons.
Yeah. There's this thing that's like kind
That
of
one
like the
has balls.
cockatrice.
Oh, there's a bunch of different.
I mean, the cockatrice is a mythical creature, but this is like a pun cockatrice where
It's-
it's a rooster that is also a dick monster.
It's fascinating seeing because these are all like simple line drawings, or probably because they were carved talismans. But the different ways that vaginas are drawn, because you have to simplify it, and it's kind of a complicated shape. That's fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Pass it on, yeah.
I am very fascinated by that.
But there's a debate now going on that maybe some of these were actually parody medals. Like there's one that I will try to find the image for. It wasn't in the book. This was in other research I was doing where it is a vulva wearing a hat with legs and arms, an anthropomorphic vulva and a walking stick, and it's going on pilgrimage. And then there's a depiction of this same anthropomorphic vulva, but this time with a crown on a little litter that's being carried by three creatures that are penises with dog legs and dog tails, and they're carrying it. But there's also depictions of this same scene of men carrying the Virgin Mary. And so there's this
Wow.
idea that this might be a parody that somebody has done, in
I
like
see.
a body kind of dismissive, ha ha ha.
Now these are pictures.
This is actually medallions.
These were medallions
or medals. And
Okay,
yeah.
somebody took a lot of time to do that joke. That's great.
Yeah, they're like personifying it into characters.
Yeah.
It's like, come see it this summer on ice.
Speaking of
On
the
tour.
Speaking of the Virgin Mary, she is often depicted in an oval-shaped enclave, right?
Yes, and I think I know where you're going with this because I've seen versions of the Virgin Mary where it's like a drawing of her full figure.
Yeah,
and
in
the
the
way
robe.
her head is kind of wreathed with a hood on it, and then everything else flows down.
Yeah, and
she
think
looks
like-
like a vagina.
and like,
and
yeah,
her
Our
head
La-
would be the clit.
Yeah, and think like Our Lady of Guadalupe. This is not an accident. Like
Yeah.
that seems to be kind of intentional.
Wow.
That it is a subliminal kind of nod to like, well, she's the mother of Christ, therefore the mother of salvation. This is a symbolic representation of all mother and womanhood
Yep.
right there.
That's cool.
Then, so here's the thing that is also happening at this time in the Middle Ages, is that Christ is getting depicted in sort of androgynous ways.
Oh, interesting.
There's the femininity of Christ.
oh.
Because there are descriptions made by religious scholars and writers at the time of Christ basically birthing the new covenant and being the birth of salvation.
Wow.
And then like nurturing people at his bosom in the same way that a mother might nurse a child.
Wow.
But then in manuscripts, and I don't think this is where I'm going to blow your mind, Garth, because I don't think this came up for you. But in manuscripts, there is this thing that is the vaginal wound of Christ.
I have not heard about this.
And you look at this thing and you're like, that's a close-up of a vulva. That's a spread vulva.
Would this be where, because you got poked in the ribs, right?
Exactly. It is.
Was it
It's a
there?
representation of the spear wound from the spear of Longinus that pierced his side, and when it did, that's what finally kind of signaled his symbolic sacrifice.
Yeah.
And from that wound came our salvation.
With all of that,
Christ.
well, what really came out of it was a bunch of blood and all of the water that had filled up his lungs.
And they
And that was the salvation fluid.
But
Oh.
and that fluid actually is depicted in these, but it also has symbolically taken on the role of the blood is menses,
Oh, menstruation.
menstruation.
Uh-huh.
The fluid is vaginal. The water is vaginal fluids.
Oh, yeah, like birthing.
Yes.
Fluid. Yeah.
Or just
When,
secretions.
when Jesus'
Look,
water broke.
they're not just dry deserts all the time until they get excited, Garth. Women, there's a lot going on down there.
A lot of ins, a lot of outs, a lot of what have you.
So you have to see these
Wow.
depictions where sometimes it's like, that is a vulva. And then here's the other thing. Just like they were rubbing the Sheila Nagis,
Yes.
some of these manuscripts, it is rubbed raw or through the vellum on this wound.
So they're rubbing the paper.
Yes, because the idea was just touching a representation of something to do with Christ could also confer a blessing. And so
Wow.
here's this holy sacred symbol, let's face it, is a vulva
Yeah.
in the side of the Savior. If you rub it, it feels good.
I was gonna say there's so much about this that's like dancing around sexual gratification. I wonder if it was rubbed purely for like pious reasons, or
yeah,
might
it's
have been
hard.
kind of like a worn out Playboy.
Hard to say.
Hard to say.
There's other things that are kind of standard tropes of the time. There's a lot of stories about talking vulvas.
Oh.
The vulva loquacious or whatever. And it's like usually through some kind of magical instance, usually involving magic rings or jewelry. The woman, it literally becomes a chatterbox.
Real.
And it usually confesses secret sins of the person. So it's a story they're telling that's like kind of warning against, because let's face it, at this time, women are the bottom of society.
Right.
Right. Even though we will depict the source of our salvation as a feminine body part,
Right.
the women themselves are unclean and are susceptible to corruption, because they're all based on Eve.
Right. Wow.
But you have these stories, of the vulva that then spills all their secrets. Also, vagina dentata, the idea that there are teeth inside.
Oh yeah.
Of the medical vagina this time. There are teeth
like
inside of there.
down in there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good thing to.
It was more of a.
That's like a protection.
It had two purposes. On one hand, it was warning people of vice, don't don't go sticking your dick in anything because it might bite your dick off, and God doesn't like that. And the second one is well, dude, don't rape. She might have teeth in there that'll bite you.
Right. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Right. And that figures into. I'll take a quick sidestep from the Middle Ages in Europe, but two vagina dentata stories. One is the Polynesian god Maui, how he died is he turned himself into a worm and tried to crawl inside the vagina of this goddess.
That seems like a bad idea, man.
She had obsidian teeth in there and she chewed them up. And then
let everyone take a lesson from that story.
And then there is a legend regarding Coyote I'm trying to remember the tribe that has the story. It's in the Great Lakes region or the plains. And it is about how Coyote, there's two women who their mom is a witch, and she casts a spell so that they have vagina dentata.
Oh.
And then his solution is he kills the witch and he kills one of the girls, and then he marries the other. But to get rid of the vagina dentata, he knocks the teeth out.
Ouch.
But he leaves one soft tooth that feels really good.
Oh, I know which one that is. Yeah.
I believe it's pronounced tooth. You only have one.
Then going back to Wright's book, he starts talking about a bunch of strange ceremonies that are attested to around genitals and the worship of them. Basically, there's a lot of sects of Christianity early on, and they're all vying for supremacy. And so the easiest way to discredit the others is to accuse them of doing weird sex stuff.
Just like today.
Pretty handy little pistol in the boot, right?
Yeah. They're the degenerates.
Exactly.
One example given is that there was a lot of multiple sexual partners and orgy stuff going on. And one of the ideas was that there's a group that, because of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot, and then they want to come and that's one where the crowd wants to rape his guests, and that's the worst sin is to deny guest right, and so he gives his own daughters in exchange to protect, because that's the most sacred.
Yeah. The crowd is gonna just run in, and so he's like, no, don't take over the house. Here's my daughters. Do what you want with them. It's a fucked up story.
Yeah,
from
these
the
men
Bible,
are my guests, and they're my protection. So based on that, the idea of charity. So the idea, according to Wright, was there was this group who they would identify each other with a secret handshake, which involved wiggling your finger on somebody's palm, and that's how you,
that's
how you know you're down.
Yeah,
that's how you know you're down. And then you're like, okay, you're coming to my house for dinner. My wife's gonna make you a meal. Then after dinner, you're gonna fuck my wife.
Yeah, you show up at the house and there's a pineapple on the door, upside down pineapple. Oh, I know what these guys are up to. You're swinging.
Right, yeah. So that one gets thrown around a lot. The other one is that there is a lot of satanic sexual stuff going on involving kissing a cat on the ass.
Oh, gross.
Cat anus.
Yeah. Oh, that is so fucking gross.
Tough sell.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
And let's be fair, cats, they're always giving you their ass. They're just things.
The evil eye, the evil brown eye.
Now that's the evil eye. That is
a fig to you, cat.
That's right.
So one of the groups that gets accused, a Christian group that gets accused of doing these weird, unspeakable acts, sexual things, is the Knights Templar.
Oh, okay.
So even when this book was written in 1866, conspiracy theories about the Knights Templar and what they were up to were fucking crazy. We're running wild. Basically, what really happened is you have a religious order who became wealthier than the king of France.
Oh, okay.
They owned more property than the crown. They had more money than the crown. You cannot have that much money and influence and power when you also have a divinely appointed king, right? So the king had to find a pretense to get rid of the Templars. And the easiest way to do it was say they've done something sacrilegious, they've turned away. Right? And what this thing was, according to the knights who they then tortured and extracted
all the information they wanted. Yeah.
Was that they, one of the things is that they had to make the sign of the fig at the cross and spit on the cross and denounce Jesus. So basically, fuck you, Jesus.
So they tortured them until they went and did this.
No, these are the Inquisitors who were.
Oh, they said that the Knights Templar were doing this.
Yes, so they
Got it.
captured Knights
Okay.
Templar, they torture them in an Inquisition,
Yeah.
and extract these confessions, which you'll say anything to make torture stop.
Yes.
Right? And so that was one of the things you did, is you gave the sign of the fig at the cross and Jesus. Then you had to kiss or fillet the dick of the knight who was indoctrinating you. So homosexuality has been thrown in.
Okay.
And weaponized in this. The other thing is that they were supposedly worshiping not Jesus, but something called Baphomet.
Baphomet. I've heard of this name.
Which is usually associated with Satan now, right? The goat, image of the goat.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Baphomet.
I was visiting a mutual friend of ours, and I remember reading bedtime stories to the kid, and there's one that's Good Night Baphomet. I think it was produced by the Satanic.
So here's the thing, though.
The Satanic. What are they
Church?
called? Yeah, the Satanic Church.
Is it Good Night Moon? But
It's like
Yeah.
it is.
Oh
It's
my
really it's a
gosh.
really cute book, and all the proceeds go to like good causes.
But here's the thing. Prior to this point, nobody has ever mentioned Baphomet. It starts here.
Oh, so the King of France made up Baphomet, is what you're saying.
Or it came out of this Inquisition against. But here's the thing: how did they worship Baphomet? Well, every morning, you kiss the feet of the statue of Baphomet, and you yell out "Yallah." Huh.
Yallah.
Okay, that sounds familiar. Now, where did the Knights Templar come from? The Knights Templar were founded as part of the Crusades. They went to the Holy Lands.
Allah.
And they also do it again at night. So twice a day, you yell out Yallah or Allah.
Interesting.
The name Baphomet, in one of the confessions, the guy says, they were told me that I was to worship my Baphomet, which can also, there's a sound change that happens in language from B to M. It's the same mouth shape. M, B. All it is a plosive difference, right?
Yes.
Mohammed.
Baphomet. So
Basically,
Baphomet
the Knights
is a
Templar,
bastardization of
the
Muhammad.
Knights Templar had gone native and had converted to Islam.
Wow. That's really fascinating. So it sounds like the Baphomet thing wasn't just a made-up thing by the king. They were extracting through torture some actual information that was misunderstood.
That they would taken on some of the practices
is
of
very
the
interesting.
Muslims in the
Wow.
Holy Land. But there's a few pages later in this book he gives an alternate theory completely. It's like that's one explanation, but there are multiple confessions happening of different explanations. One is that it is actually Baphomet is a corruption of a word that means to be baptized in the waters of Mehmet, and Mehmet is another old god.
To bathe in Mehmet.
Yeah.
Baphomet.
Baphomet.
Yeah. Okay.
Basically, what they were doing is they were performing Gnostic rituals, and Gnosticism was another early form of Christianity. It was focused more on the feminine, and in fact, it's actually, I know a few people who today consider themselves modern Gnostics purely because of their feminism.
Cool.
Right.
Oh, interesting.
But it's more complicated than that.
Sure.
I'm just throwing, So, on one hand, it's like, okay, they've gone Muslim, but on the other hand, they're practicing weird, like, sex stuff related to women and worshiping,
weird,
Gnosticism.
weird sex with women.
Yeah, right? They gotta go. So that's kind of what happened to Knights Templar, and then that also gets roped into the witchcraft of the Middle Ages.
Right.
Another way of vilifying and punishing women for being women and having a vulva. Okay, so we're gonna actually dig for bones right now.
Are we going to dig for some bones?
Yes.
Dig deep.
And then when we come back, we're going to talk about some even more ancient vulvas. We're leaving the book. We're leaving the book behind because he
Okay.
ends up with the witch trials and it's witchcraft, and it's the same stuff we covered in our witches episode.
Okay.
I actually got this book from Tim, and I suspect some of his witch research that he gave us came from this book because I was reading
interesting.
to like, I know this. But yeah, so we'll talk about.
And thank you, Tim, for the book. That's full of amazing information that I'd never heard before. This is great. Cool. Let's dig for some bones.
Okay.
Ancient vulvas, here we come.
All right.
What was that laugh? I asked myself. I'm trying to recreate that as much as possible. I don't think I've ever laughed like that in my life. That was new. What is that? This is my new laugh for 2024. New Year, new laugh. We have a spanking new podcast for your ear holes called Doom Generation.
Available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Later, Doomers.
Do you like beer?
Of course you do.
Do you like good food?
You better believe it.
Then we have the show for you.
It's the Hoppy Trails Podcast.
I'm Nick.
I'm Travis. And on each episode of Hoppy Trails, we invite you to come along on our journey to explore craft beverages and the foods that accompany them.
Check out Hoppy Trails on hoppytrailspod.com or listen wherever you find your podcasts. Connect with us on Instagram at hoppytrailspod or reach out to hoppytrailspod@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you.
Come travel the Hoppy Trails with us, and remember to always say yes to the hoppy ending.
Cheers!
Well, we're back. Those were some bones, weren't they? Certainly. Wow.
I think we got some dusty bones that we can put up on his patron bonus there.
Oh, we got a bunch of dusty patron bones. All you patrons, we got your bones.
Okay, well now let's turn to dusty vulvas because they're old.
They're so old.
Old. We're getting
Blow off those dusty vulvas. Let's shine them up and bring them into the light. Talk about them.
So, the vulva is more widely represented in Paleolithic art than the penis. Did you know this?
I did not know this.
Hands down. No, not that far down. Get them back up.
All right, I'll keep them right here.
On the table. Hands on the table.
Hands where I can see them.
So going back to like the earliest art that humans are making, you have, we always think of the, and you've seen some of these, the cave paintings of the animals, right?
Yes.
There are a lot of vulvas that are not just painted, but carved into rock caves dating from that same time. We also have objects that are representations of vulvas, including treats objects like women, yeah, including a series of mammoth molars that have been worked into discs that then have vulva. The plural of vulva is vulvae.
Vulvae, not vulvae.
Maybe
vulvae. Yeah, you're probably right. Vulvae.
Or yeah, because
there's a bunch of not vulvases.
Vulvae. It's pronounced
Velveeta.
It's Vulvae.
Vulvae. Like larvae.
Yeah. But you find, and there's a lot of variation in what the vulvas look like. But they're on these discs, and those are on mammoth teeth. So we're talking like the mammoths.
Yeah, back when there were mammoths. Yeah, wow.
And that leads to the Venus figurines that everybody
knows. That was what I thought of immediately when you said ancient vaginas. I was like, oh yeah, the Venus figurine.
So the so-called Venus figurines, they are from a material culture that is called the Graviton or the Gravitian. And it's spread all over Northern Europe. It's it starts around 33,000 years before now. So 33,000 years ago is when this is happening.
I didn't
That's
know
also
there was
right as
anything
the
from that
Neanderthals are like almost gone completely at that point.
Wow.
Homo sapiens have taken over as the dominant, and they start making these figurines.
I didn't realize there were sculptures from that long ago that have lasted. Wow.
And some of the first things that they are carving are images of the vulvas, and then the Venus, what they call the Venus figurines, because these are like female torsos with exaggerated features, breasts.
Yeah, they're very round.
Yeah.
But the
portal, if you think about it, in that really ancient time, it's this tunnel that a human being is coming out of. It's very mysterious. It's very magical and sort of, like this universal.
Well, and they also know that is where all animal life, if it's not coming out of an egg, but the egg comes out of something as well. And they're like, it's all coming out of this portal. Yeah, portal.
With figurines this ancient, well, really even up to the modern times, it's so hard to know what they carved them for.
Yes.
Like,
that's true.
is it as a religious significance where you're worshiping it? Is it a talisman? Is it fun to have around?
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what the purpose is.
So until I was doing this research, and mind you, I have a degree in archaeology.
Yeah.
I always assumed the Venus figurines were just these small little, only several centimeters tall.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
But no, they are actually carving the exact same thing in bas relief, like into the walls of limestone caves.
Like big though?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like about
actual size?
About actual, I mean, they're still exaggerated, but height wise, yeah.
Wow.
They're also drawing them in charcoal on the wall in ochre next to the images of, there's one where it's like a lion's head, and then below it is that lower half of a woman's body.
I feel like I have to ask: Are these like used? Are they like? Does the vagina have a hole like that? Some ancient person could actually.
No.
Oh, okay.
One art.
I feel like the people needed to know.
One item that I saw an image of, and it took me a second. I'm like, oh, and they didn't address this function of it, and I was like, that's pretty clever. I get it. So it is a piece of. It's either bone. I think it's mammoth ivory, and it looks like they called it a blade because it's kind of a long, thin thing that clubs out at one end, and on the clubbed end they have carved a vulva.
Ah,
completely little notches for hair too.
Wow.
But then in profile, so you have the vulva on the end, but if you were to go to like the side behind that, there is now a hole that runs through this thing.
Okay.
And they're like, yeah, I don't know. They just call it like a representation of a physical representation of just a vulva, even though it has this long, almost phallic thing on it, right?
Oh, I see.
What I believe this item actually is for straightening spear shafts. You see a similar tool in indigenous Native American toolkits and other toolkits around the world that, like, arrow shafts are not always straight. What you can do is you can take that stick, and while it's green, you can run it through a tool usually made out of antler or bone with a hole, and you can kind of like tension it and straighten it out. This item is carved like a vulva. It's a joke. What does the vulva do? Well, you put the straight piece of wood into the vulva to reproduce. What are we doing here? Well, we're putting this long, straight piece of wood through here, and we're like using it to, form.
Does it just go
something that's going to penetrate something else?
Yeah,
very evocative.
Does it just go in and stay there till it stops being a green stick, or does it kind of go in?
You can just like, or you can even heat an older stick. You can steam it or heat it, and
it gets more pliable.
Yeah, and you can fold it into shape. But yeah,
even like modern mechanics, there's male and female parts all the time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Sockets.
Sockets and stuff. If you get into anything like that, it's referred to as the male and female ends of things.
And here's the interesting thing about all these ancient, Ice Age depictions. You don't really see a lot of men. Like, you don't find carved images of the male form. But you find this female form. And then when humans are usually represented in art on cave walls, for the most part, it's not in the same level of detail that you find, say, the animals. It's usually stick figures.
The humans are always like stick figures, and then the animals are beautifully rendered with all the contours, and they're really kind of anatomically accurate.
There's only one place where they have an example of a human face being represented at the time. And then, in fact, there's a bunch of them in one place. I think it's in Spain. But there is debate of whether or not those are more recent, like that they're on top of older pictures. But when you find these female forms that are drawn on, it's the same level of detail you find in those little carved figurines. You also find the first human face that is actually depicted is carved and is part of one of those Venus figurines, complete with hairstyle.
It says something about human beings that the female form was much more interesting to carvers.
It's like men love women, women love women.
Because I mean, I'm sure over the thousands of years, it was both men and women sculpting these things.
Yeah,
maybe it was, but who knows? But yeah, that's
interesting. And then move forward to the first human cities. The first city arguably is Çatalhöyük in Turkey. And we went from being in scattered villages straight to a massive apartment complex that a few thousand people lived in one giant blocky structure, which
Wow.
is pretty insane.
Yeah.
But there is a ceramic. So basically, we developed ceramics. The first things we made with ceramics weren't pots, weren't plates. They were the figurines that are basically the continuation of these Venus figures. And it's this item that's called the seated, she's the seated woman of Çatalhöyük. She is in what appears to be a throne with her arms on two lions. She is very large and like obese. Like, rolls of fat are
Well,
like,
that was
carved
pretty
in.
common with a lot of those early Venus figurines. They're very
exaggeration,
spherical.
right?
Yeah. Maybe,
And so this idea is,
yeah.
is this a continuation of this same ancient idea is carried forward? And here we have, again, something that's the next artistic evolution
What
of this ancient female
era
depiction.
was the Çatalhöyük?
Çatalhöyük is the dawn. It's just before the dawn of agriculture. We weren't even.
Oh, okay, so like 10,000
Like
years
10,
ago?
11,000 years
Yeah.
ago, I think.
Something like that.
And then it's probably
Interesting,
it's probably a continuation of the nearby Göbekli Tepe, which is like 15,000 years ago.
Okay.
So, but it's not just relegated to Europe where these vulva are being carved in Paleolithic times. Let's take a trip down under. Let's go down.
Are we going to get in the... Well, it's not really a backwards carousel so much as a boat.
Well,
here we are. We're in the south. We just went on the boat.
The boat that, when viewed from above, looks suspiciously like a vulva.
It does.
It's a portal.
Let's-
It's a portal.
come
Really,
on,
it takes us to Australia.
Come on, let's get in the canoe.
We get in the portal.
Oh, there's already a man in the canoe. Oh, never mind.
We get in the portal canoe to go down under.
Here we are. We can say cunt now.
The Aborigine people have been in Australia for 55 to 60,000 years.
Okay. Really?
Yes. And one of the first things
Wow.
they're doing is they're making art, and there is the engravings of vulvas or vulvae on stone walls in one part of northern in Queensland.
Wow.
And these are like, thousands of years old.
Are they actual size as well?
They are, they're about actual size. And it's just vulvas, and there's variations. They are very like individualized.
But it's just like a row of them all on the wall.
Hundreds of them, all over this.
Wow.
It's a wall of
but
like
they're
thousands.
all, but they aren't the same. They're all individual.
Yes.
It's kind of like those that whole the clay soldiers in China.
The terracotta soldiers.
All those terracotta soldiers were individual and like possibly were. I wonder if they were like based on real vaginas.
There are ochre handprints that are on top of them that might have came later. They are also depicted in different positionalities. So what I mean is that there's ones where they always have two little lines. So it's usually an oval, and there's two lines to denote urethra and the actual vaginal opening.
Oh, right.
Or it could be the clitoris and the vaginal opening. But then there's ones where they're like flipped over, so it looks like an exclamation point, indicating that the individual was laying
upside
face down.
Yeah, or belly
from
down.
behind. Yeah. So you see those too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they're not exactly sure though, like what the original purpose was. I tried to find some has anybody talked to the modern Aboriginals and found out?
Yeah, do they have any theories?
And I just couldn't find that much on it. But they're on a sandstone cliff. There's other things that are depicted nearby that are also noteworthy, like I think there's emu eggs, a lot of depictions of eggs. Again, this idea of like generation, the egg and the vulva together.
I like to think of it as like a family reunion. They're like, everybody get together. We're gonna meet at the sandstone wall.
The sandstone wall of...
Get in the picture, everyone. It was like,
Just in general, there in Paleolithic art, there are tons of vulvas of different sizes, shapes as objects. Just like here's a stone with a vulva carved into it. It's just a very widespread thing, but you're not doing dicks.
It's like they can't help. It's like they can't help but just like draw them on everything. It's like that weird S we drew in middle school.
Right?
You're just doodling. It's like, oh, I drew another vagina.
That kind of says something to completely negate and disprove Richard Payne Knight's theory of the phallic origin.
Everything is dicks. They
hadn't found those Venus figurines yet.
I wonder what Mr. Knight would have to say about all the vaginas.
And then elsewhere we can move into India and in Hindu, you have the idea of the yoni.
What's that?
So the yoni, the word itself is like a Sanskrit word which means the source.
Oh, okay.
And it is a symbolic representation of a vulva, and it is understood that that is what this is. But it seems kind of different than it is like usually depicted as a rectangle with an opening at the bottom. So that's the channel. So it's actually like if you were looking at like a cross section of like a uterus.
Got it. Yeah.
And then in the center is usually a hole where a thing called a lingam, the lingam stone. You know those stones that Indiana Jones had to get back?
Oh, the Shakara stones.
Yeah.
Or what do they call? It doesn't matter. It's made up.
Those are also
Yeah, the stones that glow when they come together.
Yeah, but they're lingam
crystals.
stones.
Yeah.
Which is a phallic symbol.
Oh, okay.
And so that goes and rests in the hole in the middle of the yoni.
Ah.
It is a representation of the creation of the universe.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
And that is very ancient as well. Sanskrit is just really ancient. The Sumerians had a goddess who her name translated to lady parts.
Yeah.
And the Sumerians,
that's a word for word translation.
No, really, it is.
Lady parts.
She is. It's her name was Ninima, and she is the deified personification of the vulva. Her name actually meant either Lady of Clay or Lady of the Tablet or Lady of the Brick, because she also is responsible for creating the cuneiform, which is also wedge-shaped.
Cuneiform,
right?
yeah. It looks like a bunch of little vaginas, really.
But also her name is a pun. The brick is a pun for a vulva in Sumerian. So yeah, she is Lady Vulva, basically.
Got it. Okay.
But that's...
She's a brick
house. So yeah, the Sumerians they actually were really into vulvas in general. They actually write and describe how vaginal secretions are always described as sweet.
Yeah.
In their writings, it's like they celebrate that fact.
Right on.
There was supposedly a ritual that had to happen where the king of the city would have to go and have sex. First, he had to go down on and then have sex with the high priestess of their main goddess, Inanna. And then that was to ensure the continued fertility of the kingdom for the next year.
We should bring that back. I like it.
And then after that, I was just going to talk about, the role of the symbol of fertility. It's just a magical symbol of fertility. I think that's
pretty self-explanatory.
Pretty self-explanatory there, yeah.
What does vagina have to do with fertility, Cody?
What is this anyway? And I barely rubbed the surface of, you got to get, it's deep. There's a lot more there.
But sometimes less is more. You don't want to just smash into the surface. You gave it a light touch, and that's sometimes exactly
what they want.
Is it time for Garth's Corner?
It's time for Garth's Corner.
All right. Well, here comes the Garth's Corner song. And, Cody.
Can I hear it?
I've always wanted to be... I never wanted to do this in the first place. I always wanted to be an illuminated manuscriber. Illuminated manuscriber. Oh, pray thee, Bishop, place this paper in your sight. It took me years to learn how to read and write. I've an ambition to be a rabbi scriptor. I'll illustrate too, because I want to be an illuminated manuscriber. Illuminated manuscriber! Hey, I'll fish out the tattered, torn pages of your old gospels, and I will show them modern love. So please read every line, for I shall copy each that look between and see I've drawn what I would preach. I'll be an illuminated manuscorner. I'll work hard in this Garth's Corner. Illuminated manuscriber. Illuminated manuscript. It's actually called scriptor. Illuminated manuscript. No, really, you mean to say scriptor. Scriptor. Illuminated scriptor. See, that fits better with the melody. Illuminated scriptor. Illuminated scriptor.
I get it.
Cody gets it. That was a Beatles parody, Cody. So welcome to Garth's Corner. I'm going to be talking about illuminated manuscripts. We touched on those a little bit earlier in the episode.
We rubbed them raw, like through the page. Remember?
No, you thought we rubbed them raw. It goes even further. I'm going to get into how they're made, all of that stuff. So, illuminated manuscripts. Before Gutenberg and the printing press, all books were handwritten. I mean, back into antiquity. If you had a library, it was probably always being written over and over again because papyrus, especially, wouldn't last forever. And in the desert, it might last longer, but if it got humid or there was a fire, you'd lose it. Anyway, no matter what, people were always copying books over and over by hand. And this continued into the Middle Ages. Illuminated manuscripts were a particular kind where they would have a lot of illustrations or surrounding and incorporated into the words.
Yeah.
The
beginning of Disney's Robin Hood with the rooster.
Yeah, exactly. And nailed it. That's the end of Garth's Corner. That's exactly. No.
It all goes back to Cox.
It does. Tippity-pop-boop-dopo.
That's also the hamster dance.
It is. That's right. Here's a little sample of the hamster dance. Okay, so they were made from. I mean, they were made all the time, but it became a real art form that is understood to be these are the illuminated manuscripts around 500 to 1600 CE. Slowed down in the 1400s when Gutenberg did the printing press because
there's no more need.
Yeah, exactly.
But you get interesting woodcuts that get reproduced then.
Absolutely, and
That's
they were still making it after that, but these were like collector's items for incredibly wealthy people. When you think about how much time and effort it takes to make one of these, because not only are you writing it all by hand, but people are drawing it. You have a set of monks doing this, and they're making a bunch at once.
Someday we'll have to do an episode about the Devil's Bible.
Oh. Okay, should I put it on the list?
Put a pin in that.
Because it has to do with what you just said about how long it would take to do something like this. There's the Devil's Bible. That's a story. Now that's a story.
All right, I just put it in the list of show topics. All right, so these manuscripts were mostly the Bible or related scriptures. Some were of ancient writers, like the poet Virgil had illuminated manuscripts made of his stuff. And as I said, they were made by monks and sometimes nuns in abbeys in the Middle Ages.
Because what else are you going to do?
Yeah, you're just sitting around.
Just waiting for Vikings to show up and hack you to bits.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there is actually a story about the Book of Kells where Vikings did like swarm and like burn this library, and it killed a bunch of monks, but a few were able to escape with their manuscript, and they escaped to another part of I think they were in Ireland.
Yeah.
And were able to finish it, but it's this harrowing story, and like even though they're running for their lives, they still grab their manuscripts.
You ever seen the movie?
What?
The Secret of the Kells?
No.
Oh, have you, Jared?
No. I'm thinking of Song of the Sea.
Same studio, same people.
Oh, okay. Maybe I did
the Song of the Sea, and then they did is it Wolf? Oh, what's the name of it? It's not Wolf Riders.
Beautiful animation style.
Yeah. But they did an entire animated movie about the Book of the Kells that's illustrated and animated in the style of illuminated manuscript.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I've never seen that. That sounds
really good.
All right, we'll see. Put it on my list. So these were actually made traditionally on vellum, which is calf skin. The medieval church considered paper to be unchristian because a lot of heathens and other they were like papyrus and paper. Those are pagans and heathens.
The Christians have just had it out for paper books since the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as the
burn the books
as medieval times progressed, I think they kind of lightened up a bit. But early on, calf skin.
Take the baby calf.
Yeah.
And rip its skin
off. This is the best. This is what God wants. We're going to kill a bunch of baby calves. Every Benedictine monastery was required to have its own library. And so on site, they made a lot of these books on site because books were hard to find. So they hired, this was like a big thing that monks did, was they were scripters.
I was just thinking, I remembered something about that they had, whenever they would make 2 copies.
I think that often happened.
But it was like part of the deal. It's like, oh, I'll copy this thing for you, but
I want to have one for myself.
Yeah.
I didn't see that in my research, but that very much wouldn't surprise me because it was all about
I might be.
They would all copy each other's books.
I'm thinking of the Library of Alexandria.
Okay, yeah, because they would take ships that would come into port, and one of the things they would confiscate all the books and make copies.
Yeah,
and then give the books back. I imagine similar things happened here because they were all borrowing from each other's libraries.
Because you imagine it's like, okay, they can only they're all supposed to have a library, so they're all making copies.
Yeah,
but they have to first obtain a copy.
Yeah,
2 copies.
Yeah, because they're not gonna write it down verbatim based on someone's oral. That's not gonna be very accurate.
The Book of
Bible.
Eli?
Yeah, right. What is this?
Guarantee you got some shit wrong.
What is this? The Giver? Yeah, you can't memorize a whole book. Did that happen in The Giver?
Fahrenheit 451.
Oh, I was thinking of God damn it! All right.
And we've made that reference many times.
I was thinking of Fahrenheit 9/11. They wrote and drew in silence. They weren't allowed to talk the whole time, and they only drew in the daylight because you don't really want to light a fire for illumination when you want to draw illuminated manuscripts in a room full of paper.
And you think about the locations in which they're doing this, though. Small windows, fogged glass. It's not really the clear glass you'd expect.
Yeah, you'd think maybe they let them outside for this, but I kind of doubt it.
But like the weather, in parts like Ireland and northern England.
It is tough going. Yeah, can you imagine? I mean, I sometimes bemoan the weather as an artist myself, and yeah, I have it easy. These guys had a hard time. One interesting thing, it seems that modern books are the shape they are partially because of these manuscripts, because they pretty much were what became what people were used to that turned into books. Like, for instance, books are taller than they are wide, generally speaking, and they're bound on one side. That all came from traditions with illuminated manuscripts.
I think in Roman times, they were accordioned.
Yeah, because when you think about it, like if you're
really
just putting
long strips of paper,
if you're just putting information on paper, you could assemble the paper all kinds of ways.
Yeah,
but books become standard, and part of that was because of illuminated manuscripts. So there were several. It wasn't like one monk made one book. It was several monks all working on the same projects together and
then
trading.
They bind it together after.
They would bind it together, but they processed the vellum. They all made everything on site. And some of them would write.
They were eating a lot of veal.
They would, yeah, exactly.
A lot of veal.
That's what they were, only eating veal.
I think they could use sheepskin too.
They may well have.
Yeah.
They probably wrote it on whatever they could.
I think that's like
practically.
Diplomas were traditionally on sheepskin.
There you go. Hey, where's my sheepskin? You ask your university.
Yeah.
I bought a sheepskin from you, and I went into a lot of debt. They would have people proofread it, and then at the very end, they would be illuminated and colored. So there was sort of a series of people doing different jobs.
Yeah, assembly line.
It was an assembly line, and it was apparently very boring.
You're a tracer. I'm an inker.
Well, I was thinking of that too. Yeah, like a Chasing Amy, or like any modern comics.
Yeah,
it's like you have the person doing typography, you have the sketcher, you have the inker, you have the colorist, and they all have their job. It was apparently very boring, and I'm an artist myself, but I would hate to have been having to do this because you're just copying the same thing. You just
sang a whole song about how you wanted to do this, Scott.
Yeah, but I was doing a character.
Liar!
That wasn't the real me. And I thought I was thinking to myself, well, if I was in medieval times and had to be a monk, this would be kind of cool. I think I'd be good at it. But yeah, in the margins, they wrote things like, this page was copied slowly. The parchment is certainly hairy. Just as a sailor yearns for port, the writer longs for the last line. And in part of, possibly out of boredom, they started doodling in the margins more and more. And a lot of these illuminated manuscripts were illustrative of what was happening in the story.
Yeah.
You'd think, right? But it kind of became its own genre, where they were just doing doodles that had nothing to do with what was being written in the story.
Well, also, the idea is that nobody else is reading these but other monks.
Because
the lay person cannot read. They're probably all written in Latin. And that's the whole thing about liturgical things at the time, is that only the priests could read. And that's why Gutenberg's Bible led to the Protestant Reformation, was because now anybody could get their hands on these rare items and read them. But up to this point, they're like, dude, it's just other monks who are going to read this. And let's face it, monks... They're probably drinking a bunch of wine all the time. Look, my uncle's a priest. Those are some silly okay?
Well, and it's funny because they're spending all of this time on it to make libraries. I think they did make books for wealthy people.
Yeah.
And in that case, they're, I guess, selling it, or they have something worked out. But a lot of times it's just for their own libraries, like you say. So there's not really a lot of oversight.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, maybe nobody could read, but everybody can see pictures. And they were doodling the weirdest things. I'll post a few, but really, honestly, there's hundreds of amazing, bizarre illustrations.
I think you were
going
to talk about my favorite one.
Oh, maybe. Well, I'm going to talk about two in specifically. The first being giant rabbits. Giant rabbits were a big thing, and they're like bigger than humans, carrying away villagers. There's some that are wielding axes,
which is probably why Monty Python included that.
Yeah, you got it.
What, behind the rabbit? It is the rabbit. You silly sod! What? You got us all worked up. Well, that's no ordinary rabbit.
That could be. That was a theory that I had. And people have speculated, what is the purpose? What are these giant rabbits? And most likely, it was just a joke. It was like a meme.
Well, here's a bit of a pun, too. Remember we talked about cunt?
Yes.
There's another word for rabbit that appears in Lord of the Rings as well. Coney.
Oh.
Sometimes you also hear cunny.
There you go.
And it is about, like, it really is a evocative thing of, like, the soft fur, the twitching of the rabbit's nose. It's supposed to be, like, a very
similar
vulva.
Those are some horny rabbit farmers.
And rabbits also procreate. Yeah, reproduction.
Okay.
Right?
That makes the most sense.
If you're doing these kind of, like, silly jokes, it's probably like, dude, watch out your vows, man. Don't be tempted by the coney.
The rabbit's gonna take you away.
Yeah,
you think they're fun to pet, and they're all cute, but boy, they also wield spears.
Sexy bunnies.
Right? Playboy.
Yeah. There you go. So into the modern era. The big one I'm going to talk about is snail fights.
Yes.
So
there we go.
In the 1960s, Lillian Randall wrote "The Snail in Gothic Marginal Warfare." Margins being the margins of these are the doodles on the margins.
Yeah, fighting a war against snails.
So Lillian found. It says over 70. I saw in other sources 65 examples of medieval knights fighting giant snails. This is not one or two one-offs.
No.
This is This is like a thing. I found it in 29 different
for a while.
in 29 different manuscripts over the course of not hundreds of years, but just about 20 years, from 1290 to 1310. That was like when everybody was drawing this.
It's probably because that's how long the meme lasted.
Exactly.
Somebody made it in the first copy. The next copies expand on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody and
it's like nobody's doing,
It's always
Numa memes anymore. That's old.
Yeah, exactly. So they became passé after a while, but they had their glory days, and everybody was rickrolling.
And it lasted a lot longer, like 20 years.
Well, everything went slower. Culture moved slower back then.
Those some of those medals I talked about with the vulva on them.
Yeah.
Only existed for like a very brief period of time as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
There was an example of Roman ones that depicted like sex acts on one side of the coin. And they don't know exactly. They think they might have actually been ID tokens for when you checked out a locker at the bath.
Ephemera.
Ephemera. Jared's all about ephemera.
I just learned
that was the word you learned. That is the thing you've been interested in for years, collecting ephemera.
Well, it's things that are not designed to stand the test of time, but when you find them,
they were made for the short term at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
And their context is not there anymore.
Yeah, and like this, people have been wondering what's up with all these snails.
Yeah, why the snails?
And it's not like one knight always fighting the same snail. It's various size snails, all about the size of the knight. Some a little smaller, some
these
bigger.
Snails look kind of dick-like.
They do look a little bit dick-like sometimes. Yeah, I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah.
and they're usually fighting knights. There are a few times where villagers are fighting them off, but it's always a standoff. No one's ever like riding the snail. Probably somebody is right. Anything you can think of has been drawn in an illuminated manuscript, so I'm sure sometimes they are riding the snail. There was one where it was a person's head coming out of the snail shell, but generally speaking, it's a snail
and a knight
in an antagonistic situation with a knight.
Slowly progressing against the knight.
Exactly, and they're all both floating in space. Like you're trying to figure out what exactly is happening here, and no one knows. So there are some theories. Now, Lillian Randall, who first kind of got interested in this back in the 60s, like I said, she theorized that the snails actually represented Lombars.
Okay.
which were displaced Germanic peoples. I'd heard of them. I don't know much about them, so I won't get into
Lombardy
too much detail.
is a region of Italy.
They were like warriors that were like fighting Italy. Charlemagne eventually conquered them, and basically they never gained what they had before.
And is this course, were they doing these manuscripts at that same time?
He conquered them in 772. And so this is 500 years before the snail meme.
Okay.
So what happened was the Lombards, they didn't all die. He conquered them, and they were basically, there was sort of a diaspora, and they spread out around Europe, but they became second-class citizens. And they were that way for hundreds of years. A lot of them became pawnbrokers and lenders. They had fewer rights. They weren't allowed to bear arms. And they also, because they were pawnbrokers and lenders, tended to accumulate wealth. And it sort of almost dovetails with like anti-Semitism, I would say, because people didn't like the Lombards. They owed money to Lombards, and Lombards were like,
"Look, man, if I know anything, you got to take care of your Lombard support."
The Lombard support.
You
People
know?
were not supporting these Lombards, and Randall theorized that the combination of impotence, they couldn't bear arms, and their wealth and strength made them targets. Calling Lombards snails was basically a slur back then. So it could be that they're fighting these snails, but really it was Lombards.
Okay.
So it's hard to know. This is just a theory.
Yeah,
There are other ideas.
My theory is like, dude, what's destroying all? You know, what sucks is I have to finish this manuscript in time before the snails eat the other copy, because the snails are coming to eat the vellum and the glue. And I thought that was
he's gonna eat your crop of copy.
There is in one of the in Discworld, they talk about, there's one about, it's called Going Postal, about a post office. And there's a comment about snails eating the glue they were using for their envelopes at the time, to seal the envelopes. The glue was getting eaten by snails. And there's like a joke about, which I think if you're like, he put a lot of references and stuff into his work that I don't even know what he's referencing. So maybe there's something about like binding glue attracting snails or slugs that come and eat it.
I mean, slugs produce a secretion that's sticky.
Yeah, that too.
That could be one end of it.
But I just was like, oh, maybe it's like, it's a very, trying to copy these manuscripts is like being the knight against the slug. It is a slow, lumbering enemy that needs to be conquered, but I am winning my battle against the slugs.
There you go.
That's how I would look at it.
I think that's a very fair point.
It is not actually a reference to something that happened 500 years earlier. This is a commentary on how this trudge of illuminating this manuscript only by daylight and taking forever is like being the knight fighting the snail.
Well, to be clear, the Lombards were still around in the 1200s when this was done. Okay. They were just in that position. But to your point, I think that very well could be it too. And I think more importantly, this was a meme that lasted a long time. Yeah. So it probably meant several things. Mm-hmm. It might have started it with the Lombards and then went on to have different meaning.
Yeah, I get it.
And they were all riffing on each other, and it could mean a lot of things. It's been theorized that the snails were representing the ruling class because they had this big shell on them and had like strength that way, but they were also lame. It could be a joke about a knight's armor, because usually knights fighting snails who also have armor, but they're gooey on the inside. I don't know. It could be the slow approach of death, or maybe it was just really, really fucking funny. Because honestly, if you look at these illuminated manuscripts, we may be reading into all of this way too much. It could just be that they're making each other laugh. Yeah. Because some of these are hilarious and goofy. I recommend anybody just look up illuminated manuscripts online. It's amazing.
The animals that show up are called marginalia. And there are like crazy chimera beasts that show up. And it's just somebody, doing these doodles. But the snail and the knight. So I have this friend who I've known since 1996, so nigh on 30 years. This friend of mine, and we can go a long time without seeing each other, but then we always we go through these periods of reconnecting, and usually it's like sending letters, like actual physical letters through the mail,
cool.
like a pen pal.
Yeah.
And so and she is as interested in this esoteric random silly things as I am. So she knew we had like talked about the snails. So I sent her a letter via snail mail.
Yeah.
And got in the habit of drawing on the envelope. And so it becomes part of the experience. And so on it, I had like recreated one of these knights fighting a snail, but the snail is wearing a postman's hat and has a little mail bag. And yeah. And
that's great.
Yeah. Well, it makes me wonder, could it be because a snail is sort of very naturally phallic, right?
Yeah.
You know, like these monks are having to sort of combat their own male sexual desire.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That
I
too.
like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? That's very
Back
likely.
thee, phallus.
I will
abstain. I will stay
with my brethren.
Yeah.
But golly, it's always there, you know, and it's vulnerable. And
It's not the snails, it's the goddamn rabbits.
Snails and rabbits.
Yeah, right. They are the threat to the garden, right? The snails and the rabbits.
Soul, right? You know?
Yep, that's it.
Metaphor.
Metaphors keep rolling around. Everything.
Like I said
everything.
in the Polterbites, the human brain is a machine that runs on the language of metaphor and association.
So yeah, totally.
Wow.
So, but if you want to hear that full conversation, you have to join up on Patreon because that was what we got into. Yeah. So to wrap up Garth's Corner, I just wanted to point out that I get where these monks were coming from. All through my childhood, I would doodle in the margins.
Yeah.
As an artist, just kind of habitually doodling stuff. I am very, very fortunate that I grew up in a school where most of my teachers kind of let me do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in another time or place, they would have just smacked me and been like, do your work. But I always did my work.
Yeah.
But I was just, even while they were lecturing, I would be doodling and they'd be like, Garth, what did I just say? And I was listening. But it was it's like a reflexive thing. I'm always doodling.
I find that hard to believe.
No, I was. I can do two. I can multitask in one way, which is I can doodle while I'm listening to other things.
Yeah, I guess you're not. Yeah.
In fact, it helps. Like doing art for a living, I'm always listening to podcasts.
No,
like this one.
I know. I was just making a burn at you for how often in this podcast, like, wait, what are we talking about?
Oh, well, see, that's different kind of multitasking because I'm listening to myself and you, and I'm being cognizant of the fact that I'm being recorded, and that takes away my bandwidth. So sometimes I'm like, Cody, when was that? I just told you, Garth. That's because I wasn't listening.
Right?
But if I were drawing and saying nothing, I would actually be able to hear what you had to say.
Not always
anyway,
listening, but always hearing, you know?
Yeah, hearing without listening. Anyway, I as a hoarder, the hoarder that I am, I have a giant chest. I think it's probably still at my parents' house
sketches?
of basically all of the work I ever did.
Wow.
All of my old homework and notes and stuff, because I drew on every single one.
Someday to be a traveling exhibit in a museum of modern art near you.
Yes. Gart. 1992 through 1998. Anyway, that has been Garth's Corner. Thank you, everybody, for coming and joining me in this Garth's Corner. I love you all, and happy solstice.
Happy solstice, happy Pride. This was wrapping up our Pride month.
Yeah. We wanted to the yin the yang. We did dicks. Now we did vaginas. Vulvas. We did dicks. Now we did pussies.
That's worse, dude.
Anyway, should we rank all of the different terms for female genitals?
I feel like we need.
All right, we're done.
A woman
we're done. Yeah.
Yeah, we've already pressed our luck as far as it's
As far as the luck is willing to.
We've run that rope out.
Okay. All right, let's keep it classy and talk about all of our patrons. We're gonna talk about them by just listing them.
I forgot.
And I'll say something nice about each of them with each thing you have to.
Yeah, our Monster Squadron producers on Patreon: Travis Alexander.
Oh, he's great.
By Barbarian.
Oh yeah, she's great.
Rachel Krieger.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Tom Dahl.
What a nice person.
Justin Duckham.
So it smells great.
Kelly Flynn.
Oh, wonderful in all the ways.
Gunnar Franks.
Oh yeah, cool.
Carla Harrington.
Wonderful. Oh, come on.
Havelock.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Love him.
New Jared.
Oh yeah. Hey.
Ken.
Hey, Ken. Thank you.
Brian Lamb.
Oh man. Hey, how's it going?
TJ Levenhagen.
What a great dude.
Alicia Overton.
All right. Go. Thank you.
Jordan Ramey, a different one, but the same one.
Yeah, that one too. Wonderful. Love him.
Blue Roan.
Oh, right. Great.
And Tatum.
Oh man, for sure. That cracked you up.
that is really one of my favorite bits now. I'm going to say something nice about them. And it's just like if somebody had that would have been no different than if we just had a soundboard of just pre-recorded responses that we hit every time.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Got a few times.
All right, well, I think this is for the Least Haunted podcast.
Yeah, happy Pride, everybody.
Happy Pride. We'll see you in July.
Yeah, I think our next episode is July 5th.
Ooh, what are we going to do with the topic, do you think?
I don't know.
I want to do Aleister Crowley.
You want to research it?
No, actually. We'll do whatever you want.
God damn it. I just need a break, man.
Yeah. We need a summer vacation.
We still have to get Campfire Club going if we even are.
Maybe we could hone it down and have it be like one story per week.
Yeah.
Just be like, make it easy.
Yeah. We'll talk about that later.
Goodbye,
right,
everybody.
Well,
Hey.
Anyway, thanks, Jared, for being here.
Yeah. Do you want to say is you?
I'll jump
Come on.
Yeah.
All right. So until next time, the only thing that's haunted.
2-part harmony.
Is you.
Say goodbye.
It's from Vulva.
Oh, yes, another women's magazine.
Vulva, it's an old friend. She's having a show tonight.
You got a friend called Vulva? Who's called Vulva?
Real name's Ian.
Do you mean her real name's Ian?
She's non-gender specific.
The Least Haunted podcast is recorded before a dead studio audience and is a presentation of Sequoidea Productions, LLC.